Cookin' 52 Hedgy Hype, Cookin' 52 Hedgy Hype, Cookin' 52 Hedgy Hype, Cookin' 52
Welcome
Hedgy Hype, Cookin'
everyone to Cooking
52
with
Hedgy Hype.
Hedgepigs. And hello to you, Glitter Kitten. Thank you so much for the new subscription. I appreciate it very much. You've been with me for longer than 7 months, although you've subscribed then. As people may not know, Glitter Kitten is the artist responsible for my emotes. All those beautiful hype emotes, my cute little Hedgepigs, except for the animated one, that's Prof. Neil's. And she made my artwork that I use on my merchandise. And in case you didn't know yet, Kitten, we had a wonderful thing happen yesterday. Andrew fulfilled all of his affiliate requirements. So we've got a second affiliate. We're an affiliated family now. And as everyone knows, this is Pink Pig, the mascot of the stream. Yay! And she is also the model for the cheering Pink Pig in a little skirt, because as you can see, Pink Pig does have a little skirt and a little bow over her ear, thus proving she's a girl. And hey Tom, welcome in. Let's see. Glitter Kitten, I recommend highly working with. She is incredibly easy to work with if you need some artwork done or if you need some emotes done. And she's got lovely prices and is a wonderful person. And she is also a variety streamer on Twitch herself. So Maverick is my friend Tom, and he is also a variety streamer on Twitch. I don't think I know anybody who's not at this point. I think everybody is a variety streamer, at least, if not a cooking streamer or a gaming streamer to a particular community. In any case, tonight I am going to be making meatloaf muffins, and my curtains in the living room with me have a tail. They have a soft, fluffy, squirrely tail from our kitten Autumn. And I'm hoping she doesn't join me because she does like the smell of meat. I will be making, like I said, meatloaf muffins. And I'm also going to be adding in a side dish of stewed tomatoes to add with that. And this is my grandmother's recipe for stewed tomatoes, although I add a little bit to it in that I actually add some seasoning beyond salt and pepper. So, to start out with, I have got 2.5 pounds of ground 80/20 chuck. It's my preference for that's here in a large mixing bowl so I can get in there and mush it up with my hands. And I really prefer to use a large mixing bowl so that nothing tips out. And I've kind of got a little balancing issue with my produce and stuff so that the screen isn't quite. There we go. So I've got, rather strangely, a red tomato, or red onion this time, and it is a Italian sweet red tomato. We'll see. I am the Muffin Pig. Hey, Packerbacker, welcome in. Could we get shout outs for Glitter Kitten and for Maverick as well, please? And I am going to start, like I said, I've got 2.5 pounds of hamburger. You can make it smaller if you have a much smaller family or you just don't want leftovers, but personally can't really imagine not wanting meatloaf leftovers because we like it a lot. Um, this onion does not smell so sweet, but that's okay. I'm going to peel off the outer skin. And as usual, when I do it, I cut off the growth end and leave the root end, which is that little hairy bit. I leave that there to hold the onion together while I'm trying to slice it, because if you cut off both ends, it may be, neater to your idea. But unfortunately, what it tends to do is your onion bits will slide all over everywhere. That out of the way. And then I take and put the cut side flat down on my cutting board, set the knife in the middle of the knot, and keeping my hand out of the way, I then rock back and forth on it until it goes through and cuts all the way through the onion. And as you see, that look pretty. It is a pretty onion, but nobody really cares about prettiness in onions. Welcome in. That is my cousin, TVT. I do use big bowls to fill them up. And Tara is my cousin. She is the one I used to cook with for years and years, starting when I learned to cook in her mother's kitchen with our grandmother. And I think Tara was about 8 then, and I was 10. And so, yes, I am older than Tara. I am going to make this onion a finer mince because I am making meatloaf muffins, which is meatloaf cooked in muffin tins so that they cook a lot faster and they're already portioned out. So we have got, I don't want to have huge chunks of onion like I would put in, I'm not dicing this so much as I am mincing it, because I'm not going to be cooking this down a lot like I would in a soup or a sauce. So I'm making sure it starts out smaller, carefully keeping my fingers out of the way. Hey, Raging Rampage, welcome in. Nice to see you. Lovely to see you. I am making meatloaf muffins and stewed tomatoes. That was one of my grandfather's favorite side dishes. I'm sure Tara remembers it. And it's a nice little dish that works very well with a lot of different kind of meat dishes. So this is not a dish that will work if you're a vegetarian, but beyond that, or a vegan, beyond that, what we've got is fairly low gluten, although this does use breadcrumbs. You can use gluten-free bread if you need to be gluten-free. So as you see, leaving that root end alone, it does hold the layers together while you're cutting it. Now, maybe if you have the knife skills of a professional chef, that wouldn't be an issue, but I don't. I have a lot of years of nerve damage to my hands from typing 8 to 12 hours a day on a computer, doing drafting and engineering work, and that built up a lot of carpal tunnels. So I don't trust my fingers to get out of the way. They are not so nimble as they used to be. So this is going to have one sweet onion, although this does not feel in any way like a sweet onion. It's the first time in a long time I've had an onion bother my eyes. The nice thing about meatloaf is it's a lovely, tasty, moist dish. There's a lot of variation that you could build into it depending on what you want to put into it. If I get a really lean meat or a meat that may be freezer burned from the freezer, or I just want a lot of mushroom flavor in it, I'll take some cremini mushrooms, which is a baby portobello, and I will pulse grind that to about the same grind as the hamburger in a blender. And then I will put that into the meat, raw and unprocessed. And what will happen is, as it cooks with your meatloaf, it releases its liquids, which are, of course, mushroom flavored, but it releases liquids into the meat to help keep it moist. So that's also a pretty good option if you're going to use turkey, or although I would use white button mushrooms at that point. If you're going to use turkey or you're going to use chicken to make your meatloaf, those would be good options to help keep them moist. Now, I do not like handling mushing hamburger up like this, mixing the hamburger by hand without having gloves on. So I'm going to put on some nice little gloves. Getting old does suck. I chose red in that I ordered sweet onions, Tara, and Walmart decided they were out of sweet onions except these sweet red onions from Italy, and they're not so sweet. So I take a sweet onion, 2.5 pounds of meat here, as I will be putting up the recipe for this after stream, and I salt it. And I am putting in probably 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of salt. It's kind of hard to see myself doing this these days because 2 years of my mother and my parents actually living with us, and my mom was on extremely restricted sodium, makes it so I didn't salt anything, just individual portions after it was cooked. Not the best way to get a very flavorful food, but not bad. And I am going to be putting in about 1/8 of a teaspoon of pepper. And I grind that myself in these lovely ceramic bladed grinders, just like the sea salt I put in there. I am going to add about 1/2 teaspoon of ground rosemary. And I grind the rosemary partly because when you grind the rosemary, it releases the oils that are within it. And partly because I don't like having what feels like pine needles in my food. So I grind it and always have. I used to use a mortar and pestle, and then I moved into a coffee bean grinder, and I've just sort of come into this. It's highly adjustable. I can make it bigger or smaller as I like. And as always, the equipment that I use on stream, I have listed under stream equipment in my Discord. Now I am going to add a teaspoon of sage, thereabouts. How are you doing? Welcome in. I am cooking meatloaf muffins, and I have got 2.5 pounds of ground chuck. I have got a whole sweet onion in here. I have got a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1/8 of a teaspoon of pepper, because Andrew doesn't like pepper. I have got a teaspoon of sage, that's rubbed sage, and about 1/2 teaspoon of ground rosemary. And because I'm putting tomato in this, I am adding in a teaspoon of oregano leaves, which pairs really well not only with beef, but it also anything you have that has tomatoes in it, oregano will bring out the depth, the flavor in a tomato. So that's a lovely thing to have in it. I also add parsley because parsley adds a nice flavor. It has a pretty appearance, and it is very high in iron. So, and I added a tablespoon of parsley to that. Now I am going to start mushing this up to get it combined. I do not use Worcestershire sauce, and I don't make gravy with it. This is, you could, if I was putting a lot of mushrooms in it, I would probably make a mushroom gravy to add to it, especially if you were going to have mashed potatoes with it. A beef gravy works really well too. I have a variation of meatloaf that is a French onion soup one, where I take the onions and caramelize them down like I would if I was going to be making a French onion soup. I give it all the seasonings of a French onion soup, the sage, the rosemary, the parsley, a touch of thyme, and then I would put in a little bit of red wine, like a Cabernet or a Merlot or a Cab Merlot, which I'm fond of drinking because I just like the combination. And I then go and put in the beef broth, cook it down a little bit so that it's thickened and quite a bit reduced. And then I roll the hamburger out so that it is flat. And then I would layer the onions in the broth, which is now thickened more like a gravy. And then I would roll it up like a jelly roll and seal the edges so that all of that lovely juice and caramelized onions is on the inside. And you can also put some Gruyere cheese or Swiss cheese in there with it if you are not lactose intolerant. I can also put it on top in the last bits of cooking, and then serve that with an onion gravy in addition. And that's a very interesting and uncommon meatloaf. Yeah, a lot of people use Lipton onion soup mix to cook with. I never do that because of the other ingredients in it that I can't control. It's why I don't use a lot of prepackaged foods. I don't use prepackaged broths. I don't use soups and things like that because they sneak garlic into everything these days. I mean, it's even in cream of mushroom soup, for heaven's sake. So, all right, that's a fairly good mix in and of itself. Now I am going to get off one of my gloves. And I am going to add, I use panko breadcrumbs in this, not because it needs to be crispy, but because the breadcrumbs are bigger than your classic breadcrumbs. So they're also unseasoned. I don't need them to be seasoned. I've already seasoned the meat. So I have got the panko here. And I add roughly a cup to this. And another thing I never add to meatloaf is I never add eggs to my meatloaf. I don't have a problem having my hamburger patties or my meatloaf stick together. I could certainly add it to your meatloaf if that's what you do, but I don't. The other thing I do is I add V8 vegetable juice to this to provide the liquid. I've seen recipes where they add milk to get the breadcrumbs moist, And that's just another way of keeping your meatloaf moist, is by adding a liquid to it, like milk or V8. I like the vegetable flavors that you get in the combination of vegetables that V8 uses. And depending on the day and how moist the mixture turns out to be, I will use anywhere between 12-ounce can, and 1.5 cans of V8 juice in this. It just depends on how it looks. The breadcrumbs have to kind of disappear into this so that they're the same color. With the tomato juice, they certainly do that. If you don't have V8, you can use regular vegetable broth. Let's see. Well, it does, but the meat I got from you, Tara, doesn't have that, and I still have no problem. So, Tara raised her own cattle. I don't know if she's still doing it, but for the grand price of cleaning out her freezer for her and defrosting it, Tara gave us a lot of meat, and some chicken, some fish, and a lot of really good meat from her cows that she had slaughtered. He is not Infant, the computer overlord. He is my stream tech. And we should get a stream tech command up there. Why don't you go ahead and give that a whack, honey, so that they know about you? I think that's pretty good. All right. Clear this to the side along with my glove I used. And get this out of the way. And bring out my newest toy. Yes, it's a toy. Kitchen toy. It is an extra large muffin tin. Yeah, I alternate back and forth. I'll cook something like this for Andrew where he has a lot of leftovers. And I then take and I make my own stuff. There are things that Andrew has eaten pork, I think, twice in the whole time we've been married. Andrew is one of the good ones. Ugh. See, this is why I don't want to mush stuff with my hands, because they get all mushy. All right, now I gotta take and make balls of this. And fairly sizable. This is supposed to be a serving. So you can use regular size muffin tins if you'd like. And the cooking time is 350-degree oven for 20 minutes. If your oven is a little slow, if it's basically a little bit of a cool oven, you'll want to increase that to 25 minutes maybe. That might be a little big. Andrew will probably like it, but it's a little big. And I just take and put the big meatball down there into it. Giggity, Andrew. Let's keep it with giggity. Now, the biggest thing with meatloaf is that if you cook a couple pounds of meat in your meatloaf, it's going to take a couple hours in the oven to cook, and that's a long time. That takes it out of the nightly thing. And with this taking 20 to 30 minutes to cook, I puts it right back in there into easy after work kind of cooking. If you like meatballs for your spaghetti, yeah, that probably would work quite well. I'm getting progressively smaller. Gotta stop that. And I just make sure that the meat comes close to filling the meat, the cup, but not so closely that any oils will come off and overflow, because that would be nasty. I did not grease the pan. This is a non-stick pan from Wilton, and it is a very heavyweight metal pan. It has extremely good non-stick, and it is able to be washed in the dishwasher. So it's kind of a good combination. A lot of non-stick used to be you couldn't wash it in the dishwasher because it would ruin the non-stick, but that's not true today. So that just I'm kind of packing these a little bit, but not really hard. You don't really have to. Now, if you chose to serve this with mashed potato or baked potato, it would make a nice full-on, gives you the carb to go with your meat in here. And we're not doing that tonight. We're just going to make the one side dish with it of the stewed tomatoes. That's a bit of a small one. There we go. If I wanted to be really professional about it, I would go ahead and get a food scale and weigh the little suckers. And I'm probably looking at least an 8-ounce meatball here that's being put into there. And that needs to go away. I don't think you can actually see my meatball in a tray here. This is the Wilson double cup thing here. Large meatloaf or large muffin tin, which for today is a meatloaf tin. And I'm making these lovely, nice meatballs and sticking it in here. Yep, show it if you would, please, honey. So you can see they're fairly well packed. That first one is a little large, but it's fine. That's enough, honey. Do we have a tray to put them on? Okay. We have just moved, so this is a new kitchen, a new house. It's a cute little carriage house. And it is still a bit up in the air about where things are. Sometimes they're still in the garage. And two more of this, I think. Like I said, this doing them this way as little individual meatloaf cups, it makes it especially easy to portion the food. You don't have to cook it, you don't have to cut it, and it makes it a lot faster to cut, for one thing. And I think I'm going to end up with two slightly smaller ones. Add the rest of this in here. It's mostly onions, but you like onions anyway. So basically when these are done, then you can take and just pull the little pieces of meat out and stick them on your plate. You can cover them with gravy or ketchup or whatever you would like to. And go ahead and give them a show of that, if you would, please, before you take it away. So we've got these two muffin tins that are actually being held on a jelly roll tin, which is a lipped cookie sheet, basically. Oh. And Andrew nearly dropped them on the floor. Okay, so our next thing we're going to do is we are moving from the meatloaf into the side dish of stewed tomatoes. And like I said, this was a favorite of my grandfather's. If you hold on just a moment, I need to take a drink of something. Do we have more room? As a matter of fact, no. How tall out of the pan are we? It's just kind of even to the top of the pan, Tara. So it's a big meatball. It's about an 8-ounce meatball, and it's just slightly flattened so that it doesn't do that. And the messages there. Okay. Streamer hydrated. Leonard Kitten is the lovely artist who made me my artwork for my merchandise. This is my Giggling Hedgepig emote that I chose to put on both my... Can I help you?
Shut up, kitten.
This is my Giggling Hedgepig, Cooking with Hedgepigs, double-walled metal water bottle. It's 18 ounces. It has a really nice and high-quality lid for it. Keeps things cold at least 12 hours. If you put ice in it, it's more like 18. And I have this. I have a mug. It comes in all different colors. The bottle only comes in white. The mug comes in a lot of different colors, and I've got t-shirts and sweatshirts and tank tops, and all of that is available at www.cookingwithhedgepigs.com. And I've even got a throw blanket there. Again, comes in many colors. Now, I'm going to get started on the side dish. That's cooked for half an hour, honey, if you have the timer on. And the story that goes with it, my grandmother used to cook something she called stewed tomatoes as a side dish with things. I'm sure Tara remembers it. And she used canned tomatoes that were called stewed tomatoes, and they don't make those anymore because all they were was slices of tomatoes that were peeled that they canned, and that was it. And today they add, at the very minimum, they add onion, celery, and green peppers to it, which is fine. It makes it adds a little bit more interest to it, but it's not grandma's. And the other ones they have is their Italian style that has basil and oregano and garlic in it. So you got to know I don't use that. In this case, I am going to be using some diced tomatoes here. Diced tomatoes. And this is our lone can of no salt tomatoes, which honestly, if you really are needing to have no salt, that's fine. But they don't have a lot of flavor. Salt adds a lot of flavor to things. So This is a 15-ounce can. I'm not trying to make a whole lot, but I am going to be adding in 3 fresh Roma tomatoes that I'm going to cut up just to add a little bit more flavor and texture to it. Another option for this, if you want to add more flavor to it, a little bit of bite, a little bit of zing, you could, for instance, use the diced tomatoes with mild green chilies, or something like the Rotel, which is not mild green chilies, but they are green chilies in there. And I'm going to get that started heating up. And I'm putting that at about a medium heat while I dice the tomatoes to go with it. And these are Roma or plum tomatoes. And I am trying to match the size of the dice, so it's a fairly small dice. This will add a fresher tomato taste to it. It will have to be cooked a little while, but that's fine. It just adds a better flavor. And quite frankly, in the summertime when the tomatoes are really ripe and you can get them very easily in that state at farmers markets and exceptional grocery stores, I'm usually very happy to make this from scratch, where I would use all my own tomatoes. So Grandma would serve this with meatloaf and, fried hamburger patties. And I don't remember Grandma making a lot of meatloaf, but I know that this was a side dish Grandpa liked a lot. And she always catered to her husband and the foods that he liked. Nobody else in the family that I know of, other than me now, likes oyster stew, but that was something Grandpa just loved. And I can remember Grandma making oyster stew for him with canned oysters and milk. And not the way I would do it now, but that's the recipe Grandpa would recognize. And Grandma would basically take the tomatoes that were, stewed tomatoes from a can and put them in a saucepan. And she'd add a little salt and some pepper to it. It's actually fairly peppery, as I recall. Grandma's been gone quite a while now. I believe she died in 2009. Like I said, she's the one that taught me to cook. I wanted to learn how to cook the foods that my father remembered and liked from his growing up. He has exceptional memories of her liver and onions, which make him and his sister, Tara's mother, gag to this day. So Grandma would take the tomatoes and she would cook them in a saucepan for a little while to cook that canned taste out a little bit. And when it had reached a simmer for a while and the tomato juice had reduced a bit, Grandma would then take Cantera white bread and throw it in there and mix it around and cook it for a little bit more. And that was her stewed tomatoes. And one day, probably 10 years ago now, I had a sudden hankering to have the same thing, but I liked adding more things to it, adding a little bit of seasoning, which is kind of what I do with a lot of her things, unless I'm trying to duplicate the taste exactly. So I add things like oregano to mine to heighten the taste of the tomatoes. I have put green pepper in it. I have used the green pepper with, the tomatoes with diced chilies in it, diced green chilies. And that's a nice zingy thing if you're having something especially mild like chicken. So this can pair quite well with a baked or fried chicken. Oh, where did that go? There it is. Looking for my board scraper. And this is actually easily what was in the 15-ounce can of 15-ounce can of diced tomatoes. And I'm going to add all that in. The board scraper that I've got here just makes it so much nicer to pick things up. And you don't have it dropping off everywhere. And I'm going to put that back on there. Clean off both my hands and the board of all of the tomato juice I've got here. Now, as this has absolutely no salt in this so far, I'm going to be adding more salt than I usually would. So I am going to be adding some, probably half a teaspoon of salt to this. And again, this is sea salt. It doesn't have any iodine in it. Make sure that you eat salt that has iodine in it. Iodine is very important for people for their brain function and such. So make sure that you mix your sea salt, which is slightly lower in sodium than the processed salts. Make sure that you use salt with iodine, or that you use have something like clams or oysters is a really good source of iodine. And I am going to add a little bit of pepper to this, not a lot. And again, that's about 1/8 of a teaspoon. And then I am going to add some oregano to heighten the flavor of the tomatoes in here. And that's about a teaspoon. Smell the oregano. Ooh, such a lovely smell. And give that a little mix around. Now, there's nothing wrong with just using all canned tomatoes if you want to. That's very easy to do. You can use plum tomatoes that are the whole peeled ones and then crush them up yourself. You can use crushed tomatoes if you like to. I like the extra texture of the diced. And like I said, you can get them with the green chilies in it, which makes a nice change. I am going to add some V8 to this because I would like it to add more vegetative taste to it. Plus, the bread needs to have lots of juice to soak up to add the flavor to it. So, I have got that going here, and I am going to turn up the heat slightly. More to low, medium, high, basically. Uh-oh. Did you link something, Tara? All right, to go in my stewed tomatoes, I've got a white loaf here that I cooked yesterday. I've got another one cooking right now, even as we speak. And I'm not going to use a lot of fancy stuff. We have a board, a special setup for slicing bread for sandwiches so that all of the bread pieces are even. But this doesn't have to be that specific. Sorry that the table is shaking with the sawing here. It just is. This loaf didn't rise quite right, so it's actually very dense. Still tastes good. This is what's called an antique white bread, and it is a recipe I learned because Mom being allergic to dairy, most breads have dairy in it. They have milk in it, and it makes it difficult for her to eat things like that. So most breads will make you sick. A lot of breads also call for eggs. So if you have an allergy to eggs, like my cousin, this is also a good option for you. Now I don't need that anymore. So I'm gonna just cut this up into larger chunks. Now the tomatoes are starting to reach a simmer, it looks like. Now, Grandma always just tore the bread, but she was working with bread that, was just commercial white bread and a loaf that you get from the grocery store. Terry, you lived with Grandma. Did she ever make bread from scratch just to make it? Because I don't recall if she ever did. If she did, she never did it in front of me. I mean, she showed you how to make cinnamon rolls, but different kind of bread. I would actually love to have some orange juice right now. I'm kind of sick at the moment. I've been actually running about 100-degree temperature for 4 days now. So that's not fun. My chest is kind of bunged up. Yeah. Grandma's mom was an exceptional cook. Dad still has stories. I don't know if your mom, Aunt Judy, ever tells about it, but Dad was just always over the moon about the cinnamon rolls she used to make on her wood stove. Yeah. I need to move to Idaho. That would be lovely. But I don't know. I might move to Spokane eventually at some point, but I'm not going to move that far away from Mom and Dad yet. So Dad is in a hospital rehab, and he has been since April 4th. He's been either in the hospital or in the rehab since April 4th last year. And he's not doing well at all. He's not regaining his strength. He's actually losing his core strength. So he's not really able to hold himself upright in a chair anymore. Mom is in assisted living where she and Dad used to live before they moved in with us. And she's a little lonely. She gets to visit Dad and all, but it's not the same as having her husband there. They've been married for 63 years, coming up on 64 now. Don't know how much of these breadcrumbs are going to work in there, but I'll work in what I can. It's kind of a small pan for me. Tara should be proud of me. It's a tiny pot. Like she said she was making of, she's making a tiny pot of soup, and that just doesn't really compute with me. I mean, I can justify the small pot here because it is, after all, a side dish. But she's talking about a pot of soup in a tiny pot. I mean, seriously, did I not teach you better than that? baby pot. Yes, baby pot. You know what? Just like a horse, you don't back the horse until its legs are mature enough to hold the weight of a rider, and you don't make soup in a baby pot because what's the point? It's so tiny. If you're gonna make soup and put all that effort into it, at least make it in the 5-quart Dutch oven so that you have. Here's a thought: soup to freeze. You had to know that was coming. Erin and I spent from before she was married to her husband to, I don't know, several years into her marriage, cooking together once or twice a week. And we would always take and make a lot, of course. And then we made up happy little freezer boxes. Can I ask a French onion soup question? Yeah, go ahead. I'm waiting. Those were the best time. Bubbly pots and what do you call it? Cocktails. Because, cooking always goes better with alcohol. French onion soup, in case other people's. Well, what have you been cooking them in? You're just supposed to have a little bit of oil and vinegar, oil and butter, and not a lot. And you're supposed to cook them down so that they're not in a lot of liquid. And you have to caramelize the onions by letting them cook that way. Then you have them too wet. Yeah, you have them too wet. What did you put them in? Tell me the steps. What did you do? Did you follow the recipe where you take a couple tablespoons of butter with a couple tablespoons of oil and you cook probably 3 or 4 large onions in it? Take a picture and send it to my phone, honey. I'm not sure if there's anything I can do that'll save it to make it official French onion soup, but it'll still be a nice onion soup. French onion soup is onions that you take and you slice thin, and you take a saute pan, which is like a frying pan, and you put a couple tablespoons of butter and a couple tablespoons of oil in it, and you put your onions in it and you cook it under a medium-high heat. Like I said, take a picture. And the onions first start to sweat out, which is when they turn clear. And then you will reduce the heat and start just cooking them down, and they will start to turn golden. And then you want to actually get them to where they are very caramelized, which is when they are a deep golden brown. And at that point, then you can add the broth to it, which is beef broth, although I have made it with chicken for a chicken French onion soup, which I may do sometime soon. It's very nice. I'm going to turn the temperature down on that. The tomatoes are tasting cooked. How much time do we have left on the meatloaf, honey? 50 seconds. So I'm going to start adding 15 minutes and 50 seconds. I still have plenty of time then. Yeah, write it down. I can't quite hear you. That is nothing like what I heard. Now, the bread that you put in here, it will soak up the juices, which is what you want it to do. I'm going to take a picture of my. I'm going to take a look at the picture she just sent me. That's got a lot of liquid in it, Tara. You're using the wrong kind of pot, too. You really need to put that in a frying pan where it's less depth and more surface area. So switch that to your big Cephalon frying pan that you make the burritos in. Yeah, French onion soup, to caramelize the onions, it takes almost an hour. This is about a 1 quart saucepan here. I probably should have done this in a 2 quart. This is just a really simple side dish. It has a lot of potassium in it because tomatoes have a lot of potassium. Not as much as if you were going to have an avocado. Avocados actually have more than bananas or tomatoes. I think I definitely made too much bread. And this will mush down into the liquid. You want it to be fairly thick, but not so thick as they have no juice at all anymore. You need to spread the cubes back out, right? Take it down there where I can actually see it. Stir it a bit better. Right. There is still some liquid in the bottom of this. Doesn't matter, Terry. You had a question. It's a legitimate question. I'd help anybody with it. I wouldn't hand out my phone number to just anybody. I'd tell them to put it in the stream, but I'd tell them to put it in my Discord and I'd take a look. But okay, so this will soak up the amount of bread I've got in it. Add another couple because I'm a glutton for punishment. And put that back on over a low heat so that the bread can soften, and it's not really like a stuffing consistency, but it is definitely the bread is very soft and wet, and combined with the tomatoes and some herbs in it, it's a lovely side dish. Andrew does like stewed tomatoes. He's had them before, and he found them a lot more pleasant to eat than to look at, I believe is how he put it. It went well with the dish that I made at the time, and I usually serve them with beef. So, if we're going to do something like some grilled hamburger and not put it on a bun to make a hamburger out of, I've got this lowered down to a low heat so it can just simmer at it. I don't want it to caramelize. I don't want it to burn. What do you want to do with the rest of it? I'm just going to put them on a paper towel and put them off to the side depending on. I don't really want to throw them away because I'm going to be making stuffing later this week. I'm going to make some chicken casserole stuffing, where I've made the turkey version of it for you guys before, where I make the stuffing like I would for a turkey. And I put chopped up cooked turkey cubes in it, and that's then baked in the oven for about 45 minutes. And you make a gravy, and you've got a turkey dinner with, without all the fuss. You've got stuffing and turkey in it. You make gravy, and then we just add mashed potatoes, and you've got a Thanksgiving dinner in about an hour. As a matter of fact, I did do a Thanksgiving dinner in an hour as one of my streams. You find that on YouTube. Now, if this was to have fresh peppers in it or something, it would add a little bit of crunch. I do basically use the bread as a thickener. I do want it to mostly fall apart in this. Hey, Geek Horn, welcome in. I am the muffin pig today. I am making meatloaf muffins, which are almost ready to come out of the oven. And that is my clever way of saying they're meatloaves that I cook in a muffin tin. And I took 2 pounds of 2.5 pounds of hamburger, mixed it with 1 diced sweet onion. I put in salt and pepper. I put in some rosemary, sage, and oregano. And I put in panko breadcrumbs. And then I put in, mixed all that up and put in some V8 juice with it to moisten up the breadcrumbs and keep it nice and moist. And then I rolled them up into about 8-ounce meatballs and put them into the muffin tins and smushed them down just a little bit. And it has a half-hour cooking time at that point. So you can get meatloaf in half an hour. You can eat them originally like that, cut them in half to make hamburgers, leftover meatloaf sandwiches. They're absolutely lovely. Actually, the music is my choice. It's from Spotify, and it is royalty-free from Fixed, F-I-X-T. And this is the one called, let me look. I usually use Chill. I am on one called Feels. There is one called Chill, which I usually use. Andrew uses a version that is gaming music. And he is now I believe he's got the affiliate. I know, leftover meatloaf, what is that? That's when you have 2 people and you cook 2.5 pounds of meatloaf, Glitter Kitten. So we try to come up with leftovers, and no matter how I try, they never last for very long. This, I'm fairly sure, is done. And it sounds like the meatloaf might be as well. So I'm going to put this down. I'm going to singe it. Can you reach it?
Do not touch, they are hot.
Okay. And here's my little individual meatloaves. What I need to get is a plate. Oh, that was incredibly dumb. That was a little bit too long to stick in a vinyl pan or vinyl place, not tablecloth. So here we have the individual little meatloaves. If you're the type of person that likes to have a glaze on top, that is the perfect. That likes the glaze on top of ketchup, you could certainly add that when you put these into the oven. I'm going to get it out of the muffin tin here. I'm going to give him 2 of these little devils. So he's going to have 2 of those. I'll turn this sideways so I have a little bit of room to put the plate down. It's not cooperating very well. Everything has feet on it so it doesn't slide. Then I'm going to take put down a nice little layer of the stewed tomatoes. And now I just need to get my little paws on the parsley. That's a little bit of pretty to it. A little bit of pretty on it all.
It's a face!
It is a bit. Andrew's going to go take a picture of this with a nice fork. Perfect. So this made 1, 2, 3, 4, it's 6, about 9.5 portions out of that, so it's fairly decent. Well, it depends. This is the very basic meatloaf that I make. I like to put tricolored bell peppers in it. So I've got orange, yellow, and red bell pepper. And I like putting mushrooms in it. I put zucchini in it too. That combines very well. And even using diced tomatoes to put in it is a nice little vegetable kick. It just depends on what it is you want to do.
Want to show it off to people?
Yeah, I am going to show this off to people. Here is the finished plate. It is I'm running into the thing. It is the meatloaf muffins and the tomatoes. I'm gonna have a taste of the tomatoes for you. And they are smoking hot.
As you can see when it comes up on the stream, it's very steamy.
The tomatoes are cooked. They have just enough salt in them that I can vaguely taste pepper. I normally would have a lot more pepper in it. The kitten in the windowsill wants to have a taste of this too. Now, you've had a taste of the meatloaf, honey. Please describe it to them.
Yeah, I was going to, but you were busy talking, so. So it's quite nice.
Mm-hmm. Talk loud so I can hear you.
They can hear me fine, trust me. It's, I've lost my train of thought, so.
Describe the meatloaf first.
Meatloaf is soft with a nice bit of crunch from the onions. Very meaty, very tasty.
Good salt balance.
Yeah, actually. It's nicely balanced salt. I don't actually feel the need to put any additional salt on this. I add a touch of salt to the tomatoes, but pepper and same. It's actually quite nice. It's quite sweet.
The fresh tomatoes add a sweetness to the stewed tomatoes. You can taste the pepper a little bit stronger in it. That you can definitely taste the oregano, deepening the taste of the tomato. The oregano in the meatloaf also is bringing out the tomato juice that I put in it. And you can also taste the sage and the rosemary. It's a standard meat mix that I put in everything. The tomatoes cooked about 20 minutes. The tomatoes cooked about 20 minutes, and that was a can of diced tomatoes along with an equal amount, 3 plum tomatoes that I diced up and cooked fresh. You want to cook them about 20 minutes in order to actually get the sugars to come out in the tomatoes. That's where you get the sweetness from. The fresh tomato, when it's cooked, after about 20 minutes, you don't just have the sharp tomato taste, you have a sweetness that comes as the sugars within caramelize as they're cooking. There's never any need to actually add sugar to tomato products. You need to just skip that. We are going to raid out to a Rubik's Cube. Well, actually, no, we just did him. Why don't we go to Evo? Let's go to Evo, who is a lovely streamer. She is a partner with, she is actually a partner with Diablo. And she's a lovely person. She's very funny. She's a variety streamer. She does a lot of PvP type games. So I want to thank everybody for coming and seeing this. Once again, I will put up pictures. I will put up the recipes for both of these recipes onto my Discord after stream. And my next stream I'm planning to be on Tuesday, and I am planning on doing an art stream. I'm finally going to get to doing the portrait of Meg, who was my husband's seizure dog, service animal, and we lost her a couple of years ago, and she's greatly missed. And I am going to attempt to do an acrylic painting of her, starting off doing the sketch and then painting that. So that will be Tuesday, and I've got another stream towards the end of the week. I think it's Thursday. Could be Thursday or Saturday. I'm not sure which. I'd have to look at my schedule. And I will be making appetizers. I will be making things like I'm going to be making a shrimp appetizer, and I'm going to be making one with beef, and possibly a bruschetta, which is basically a tomato salad on nice toasted bread. And it's usually rubbed with garlic, but you know I'm not doing that. So I would love to thank you all so much for coming. Thank you all so much for being so active. I'd love to see you again, and we'll see you next time.